what I want to point at is something very interesting that you mentioned, that there was this clear sender receiver relationship between the West and large parts of the world, whether it's the emerging economies or even to some extent here in Europe. A lot of stuff just was coming straight from North America. It wasn't being worked upon here in the way that it was being worked upon in Silicon Valley. I can't think of a quick Silicon Valley comparison here in Europe either. A real place where such stuff happens. Now, in this relationship of the sender receiver now sort of being muddied and disturbed, where locally people are taking care of some of their own issues, if cell phones are too expensive, somebody comes up with one that's cheaper and can be bought by the locals, and this is happening all over the world. How do you see, because this is a little bit about Volvo, your work at Volvo as a chief data officer there. How do you see the data that Volvo receives from the source is the car, right? Any usage statistics, or if it's research about the real world for self-driving cars, whatever data is being recorded or received by Volvo, how does it then see it? Because it may not be able to predict an innovation in how roads might be designed in, let's say, Pune in 5 years. It cannot predict that, but it's probably looking at it, right? Or is it?
Yes. Yeah. So my transition to Volvo was to start an e-commerce product for them, where we wanted to. The product is already live. It's called Care by Volvo. It's a subscription for a car. So just like a Netflix subscription, you can subscribe to a car month to month, all included, your insurance, service, everything. And no questions asked. You can go and return it at the end of your subscription. In some countries, actually in Germany, it's doing really well. Probably we've come down to 3 months subscription. We started with a year or 3 years based on the country, and now we've come down to 3 months. And it's working really well. And again, it was interesting because we wanted to launch this subscription for the urban population. And thinking that, that was a hypothesis. But now when you kind of think about it, people in urban areas don't want cars.
Right. Yeah.
So it's an ongoing evolution. And then I moved on to leading the data team. And to your question about how all this data is being collected. So think about it as now each car is a computer that's traveling hundreds of miles per month. And we are collecting all this data. So there are a few challenges to kind of think about what is the right data to collect and why to collect. And so to begin with, of course, safety is a big part, especially for a company like Volvo. So any data with collision that helps with safety is going to be prioritized to ensure that the cars are safe. Second is, of course, the ambition to be autonomous. So then we are collecting data to kind of, or having algorithms for the car to understand through the cameras, objects and spaces around them, to be able to figure out how can we train the machine to be autonomous. And as we kind of get further out into autonomous driving, I think that is going to influence the planning of cities a lot, both in terms of the scale, like how wide should a road be or how narrow should it be, because now it's all autonomous and the room for error is the precision is high.
Low. Precision is high.
So then maybe it's okay to have more space for sidewalks, or maybe there's a bike lane, or the levels between the bike lane, the sidewalk, and the street have to be a certain height, so it's intuitive enough for the car to understand not to go there, so that the camera can see the depth. Or even so that is the physical aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The other big aspect that I think will change is the aspect of traffic lights and signals and technology around that, because right now, you know how you have synchronized traffic lights and a lot of that. With more information coming from the cars,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the traffic patterns could become more consistent, and that could evolve as well.
With artificial intelligence.
Yeah. And so also, I mean, the vision at most car companies have, and this is kind of really cool, is each car becomes a computer, or it will be a computer
Mm-hmm.
that's sharing information back so that things can be safer and you can be autonomous. But then each car will be sharing information with other cars. So
Yeah.
like car sourcing.
Constantly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just like crowdsourcing, they're sharing data with each other to predict, oh, there's snow. But I mean, the information takes time to come in, because there are like 10 cars ahead of me and they've predicted a storm 100 miles from here. And I'm getting that signal. So I'm going to figure out a different route to go, or I'm not going to go. So a lot of that is going to change, and it's going to become pretty mechanical at some point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The one thing that we are realizing with this is really interesting is, as a lot of this information is coming in, and when you think about biases on that. So with autonomous driving, there was a research that happened, and to figure out when people are crossing the road, kind of gauging the depth, height, speed, and then training the car to avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
So the test happened with average sized human beings. It was fine. The minute there was a shorter person or a taller person or a dog, the car could not understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And then take it a step further, a lot of these tests had happened on white people.
Okay.
So the perception was different when there was a black person crossing the road. And no one had thought about it because the folks who were training the model were all white. And the folks who were part of the experiment were all white. So these are biases that have happened. I mean, they've kind of come through digital for the longest time. Like when you think about the innovation of the mouse, the right-click mouse was invented first. No one thought about a left-click mouse. And then they were like, oh yeah, what do left-handers you do? And then we kind of follow. So just it depends on who's designing. So with autonomous driving, now when we're testing at a larger scale, we are realizing the biases that were built in when the technology had just started.